So taking a moment in this meditation with beginning images to hold on to. One is of boats and caves and places of our own hiding and our own fear. When God calls us out into the fray, Christ calls us into the storm, are we tempted to stay in the boat or to hide in that cave for fear? And so a backdrop phrase, two phrases. If you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. If you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. And then a ship in harbor is safe. But that is not what ships are built for. In fact, if ships stay in the harbor and never go out into the open seas, they will rot. Because ultimately a ship is strong when the waves are battering it. So those two images, seeing yourself as one called out into the fray. So you can picture the scene. Put yourself in the gospel scene in this story. You are in the boat, a small boat, and the waves against you all night, and you are exhausted, keeping your little boat afloat. And as you are about to surrender to the dark, just before the dawn, you see a figure walking through the storm, defying gravity and fear, and you just add that to your fear. You add that to your fear that ultimately that this is an image of terror or a ghost or an aberration. Another thing to fear, to add to your mounting fears of wind and waves on your little boat. And in a moment then you hear this voice cutting through the wind and the waves and also the fear in your head. And that voice says, "Hello, my child. Don't be afraid. It is I, Jesus." And in that moment, putting yourself in that boat with Peter, you have that moment when I can imagine Peter thinking, well, geez, this is coming on the heels of a powerful feeding of 5,000, and now you're walking on water? Prove it, Jesus. Or maybe in the pride of Peter, calling the bluff of the ghost. Maybe he's exhausted. He's just trying to rub his eyes. And in that, the answer comes to Peter, all right, come out. And in doing that, he has no choice but to go out and walk on that water. And as he's walking on that water, as you are walking on that water, you get distracted by your fears. You lose sight of Jesus in the storm, and you let the fears define you, and you sink like Peter, like a rock. And in that moment, when your pride and your sense of, looking what I'm doing, I'm walking on water, you recognize that you have to turn your face back to Jesus and cry out in your humility and ask Jesus to save you, because you cannot save yourself. And it is faith that Jesus points to, because it's Peter's weak faith that is distracted by the storm that takes his eyes off of Christ. And in that moment, he sinks and is about to drown until he comes to his senses and cries out. And in that moment, Jesus reaches, scoops him up in love, but also points out the fact that his faith is so weak. And so if in the midst of the story, put yourself in this story. Or better yet as well, put yourself in the cave with Elijah. A cave of fear, of being hunted down or being attacked or being... What I would love us to explore today in these lessons is, what is your boat? What is it that you're hanging on to? And then what is your distraction when Jesus calls you out of your safety net into the fray? How easily are you distracted? How's your faith these days? If faith, it saves us, we must pray, increase our faith. And if we are tempted to stay in the caves of our fear, the boats of our safety, and we don't hear God calling us out to show us God's majesty, or Jesus calling us out to show us what trust looks like. And we are doomed. Such faith to walk on water. How about raise the dead? Such faith to save this world from itself. These days, my friend, calls us, we must get out of the boat. We must get out of the cave. We must allow God to call us out into the fray. So let us seek a deeper faith, a deeper trust in God in the midst of empires seeking our demise, or nations rising against nations, or of storms and waves and wind and exhaustion. We need more faith. Jesus says to us, "Oh, my beautiful child, how little faith you have, but I love you. And I so desire to increase your faith, because the faith the size of a mustard seed could move mountains." And you don't know the potential that you hold, that your fear prevents you from realizing the power of God within you, around you, and that your anxiety defines you and distracts you. If you want to walk on water, you need to get out of the boat, leave your familiar security of status quo, of assumed safety, and if you want to meet and serve God, you've got to get out of the cave. You might say, "Well, Father, I don't want to walk on water. I'm pretty comfortable in my boat. It's got a seat. I'll ride out the storm. Or my cave, I redecorated it. That's nice." But I think in essence, God is not going to leave us in the cave or leave us in the boat. He's calling us out into the fray. We have to leave the boat the best way we can. We need to get out of the cave and watch God's majesty and participate in God's grace and his power of love in this world. We need to get enter into our discomfort and fear and find Jesus right in the middle of it. God is in the storm, but God is not the storm. Jesus is standing in the waves, but he is not the waves. So how's your faith these days? I want to call us into a deeper faith, a prayer. Lord, increase our faith. Deepen our trust in you beyond this world. Let us not let the storms or our fears distract us. It just is what we need to do. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We all need to get out of the boat. We need to meet Jesus out there, because that's where God is, and that's where our brothers and sisters who are drowning, that's where they are. Your faith leads you straight to Jesus. More faith leads to more trust, leads to more courage, leads to more impact on the lives of people hungering for love. So realize this. Maybe you are a ship and you are meant for broader seas. You can't stay safe in the harbor because you'll just rot there. Trust God. Staying in the boat is safe, but that's not what you were created for. You must pray, increase my faith. Risk daring for the sake of Jesus. Trust, radical trust in Jesus. Even when you are afraid of ghosts or afraid of apparitions that may or may not happen, we get out of the boat when faced with the futility of piling a boat against the wind. When faced with this futility, we are exhausted, yes, we are afraid, but we need to nonetheless get out and dance on the waves. Trust God that you can overcome anything that would be your obstacle, that there is nothing that can keep you from Christ. So, realize this. When standing in the sheer silence of the miracle of God, the very presence of God, all human fears and futility are overcome in the reality that when we get out of the cave or when we get out of our boats, God is already there, calling us, cheering us on, walking with us and leading us, calling us to risk and be brave. And one could realize that there is more going on in this world we can ever see, that faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen, and realize that you are more than you could ever imagine. So I'll close with these words that the only way to realize Paul's closing words in that second lesson today is that you need to deepen your trust and faith in God and find the courage to encounter the other. But how are they to call on one in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in one whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone to proclaim him? And how are they to proclaim him unless they are sent? So blessed are your feet, dancing in the waves of the storm, meeting Jesus in the midst, following God out of the cave. So, the world is seeking love and hope and peace. Let's dance in the waves and follow Christ more deeply in our faith. Amen.